Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I almost turned into 𝔬𝔢𝔨𝔨𝔨𝔢𝔫𝔨𝔶𝔨𝔨𝔨 starling there for a second. Anyway. So welcome back to my channel, and today I'm giving you the most basic YouTuber stuff that anyone could do, which would be a Q&A. So I asked you guys on social media to send in a few questions that you have for me to kind of get to know each other a bit better, and also these questions did not have to be just relating to witchcraft or my practice specifically. They could also be to me personally, to queer stuff, Silesian stuff, culture stuff, just stuff. I have my questions all here on my laptop, and I hope I won't miss anyone. If you've sent me a question and I kind of skipped over you, please complain in the comments. So without further ado, here's the first question. Just a Green Witch asks, what is one piece of advice you wish you could give yourself when you were starting out with witchcraft? Well, I'm pretty proud of how I kind of entered this witchcraft sphere, to say. I wouldn't necessarily give myself any big advice, because I think I ended up exactly where I needed to be, and I don't think that I would necessarily change anything about that journey, because I think that journey was important to go on. So to kind of give yourself a rough timeline of how my practice developed, as a child and growing up, I kind of always heard my local folklore, and I heard about local folk practices, and always was encouraged by specifically my grandparents to kind of read stuff like that, and to also get to know the herbs in my area. And this is where kind of the witchiness began, and then later that kind of fizzled out as I grew older. And one day I came across a video, I think actually that it was Harmony Nice's Book of Shadow video. If you guys don't know who Harmony Nice is, she was basically the biggest online witchy creator before this modern occult time, before occultism really took off. She was like Wiccan centric, but that opened me up to the idea that this is actually a thing that exists in the world, that people pursue, that people learn about, that people practice and believe in, and I found that really interesting, and I dived in headfirst, not into Wicca necessarily, but into research to kind of get to know what is this even about. And that's also reflected in my grimoires that I wrote at the time. One day I might show you guys how that exactly looks, because I always wanted to do like a grimoire flip through. That sounds so exciting. Anyway, that kind of led me to this route of researching, and what I saw was mostly just Wiccan practices and more New Age spirituality. And although I found it interesting to research that topic, it did not really click with me in any meaningful way until I kind of learned about traditional witchcraft and folk magic specifically, and then I made that connection in my mind to oh, these things that I learned about as a child and folk magic, these are connected. And then I went down that rabbit hole, and now I feel very much more at home in my practice than I did initially. So I think the advice that I would give myself necessarily would be to not stress it, to not worry as much about what other people are doing or what seems trendy, and not trying to be like someone else that you're not, because I felt like if I were go down a witchy route, I would have to pick some kind of Western New Age spiritual system that did not vibe with me. And if I had known that folk magic existed, specifically the folk magic that I practice now, that would have alleviated some of that stress. But I think it was also kind of important for me to go down this route of researching, so I kind of learned about everything a bit and kind of made myself like a clearer picture of what's out there. But yeah, if I had to give myself, my past self, any advice, it would be that probably. Just a Green Witch also asked, What paths in witchcraft do you find particularly interesting? Besides �𝔭𝔬𝔢𝔨𝔢𝔫𝔨𝔶𝔨𝔢𝔫 the folk magic that I practice currently, I also research stuff on �𝔬𝔢 or �𝔬𝔢𝔨, which is a branch of folk magic that was practiced in the county of 𝔇𝔢 or 𝔖𝔨𝔄𝔬𝔢, which is a region in the mountain ranges of Lower Silesia, where a large chunk of my family is from. And actually, the funny thing is, I don't have that many ancestors that lived in northwestern Germany like natively. Most of my ancestry comes from all over the place, and as I said, a large chunk comes from Silesia. So I want to research in that field a bit more to kind of be more connected to my ancestors. No, don't get me wrong, �𝔭𝔬𝔢𝔨𝔢𝔫𝔨𝔄𝔬𝔢 and northwestern German folk magic is still very important to me because I live here and I grew up with the folklore here, but that's not necessarily where most of my ancestry comes from. So I want to also get into the folk magic that my ancestors would have probably known about or even practiced, like Pillweiserei. It's very hard to get any good information on that because, you know, of the Schlesian genocide and the turbulent history of Silesia and its people. It's very iffy to research, but I guess that also is a reason why I find it so interesting and so intriguing, because there's not that much information around, and most of the information that I got was from books on the folklore of the county of 𝔇𝔢, or also called 𝔖𝔨𝔄𝔬𝔢. Also, let me know if I should make a more specific video on Pillweiserei or Silesian folk magic in general, because I would be kind of interested in that. The Mad Owl asks, what is your personal reason for being religious/spiritual? Interesting question. I do not consider myself religious necessarily, because in my mind religion always kind of goes hand in hand with some form of orthodox praxis or general just dogma. And in folk magic we don't have like something comprehensive as the Bible. I mean, we work with the Bible sometimes, but we don't adhere to one specific text like in its entirety and all the time. And in folk magic it's all more up to interpretation. And I don't think that these elements necessarily jive with my personal definition of what a religion is, so I don't consider myself religious. Spiritual, as you said, probably would describe it a bit better. I'm spiritual because, well, it's kind of hard to explain. I think spirituality is a thing that is often missing in modern day consciousness, and most of that has to do, in my opinion, with really bad experiences people have made with spirituality or religion, and this sort of stuff being just relegated to the realm of superstition or just fairy tales and stuff. And for a long time I kind of thought the same, but I kind of got around to the idea because I not only just felt that there was something more unexplainable that I, in my personal life, could feel but could not like verbalize or quantify in any scientific way, but also spirituality is not just a way for personal development and analyzing the world through a specific lens. It's also a way to connect to a culture and a place and specific aspects of nature and the self and the family. And spirituality in general gives a really good framework to work off of and to make sense of the world and kind of engage with it. Not saying that you cannot engage with the world if you aren't spiritual, but just spirituality offers another lens to view things through, like another perspective. And I think it's that perspective that I'm really interested in and that I really like to have in my life, to kind of not just look at the outside world as that matter that is ready to be like exploited or used or kind of to service to humanity, but also view it through a spiritual lens and kind of see the animism in it and see the life in it. So in short, I would say I'm spiritual because I like to have multiple different perspectives on things, and I also kind of like the lens through which I can engage with the world. Finn asks, are there any non-Germanic or non-folk practice deities that you find interesting / want to incorporate in your practice? No, I don't think so, at least not right now. However, as a child I was obsessed with ancient Egypt and its religion, and specifically the deity Horus in particular. And I drew falcons and depictions of Horus all the time, and I always kind of inhaled media that had vaguely to do with anything Egyptian spirituality or Horus specifically. If you would have asked me as a child then and I were to be aware of the concept of spirituality and paganism and stuff like that, I would have probably said Horus. But nowadays, not really. I mean, I still hold a lot of reverence for him and the entire Egyptian pantheon because it's such a place of like nostalgia for my childhood days for me, and I think it's still such a beautiful and rich culture, but I don't necessarily feel the need to incorporate that in my modern practice. So I'm just sticking to basically what I know most of and I'm most familiar with and I feel the deepest connection to, and that would be folk magic specifically and deities in folk magic like 𝔬𝔢, like Frau and folk saints, etc. Anais.mm asks, would you speak more on the queer experience in Germany? It's nerve-wracking, is what it is. Because I come from a really tiny town in northwestern Germany, a really Catholic town in particular. And the people around here are pretty conservative, and I won't lie to you, at multiple times growing up here, I had to fear for my safety. And my village in particular has a pretty dark history with queer people. For example, the first queer man to be semi-openly queer here in my village got beheaded. And that was in the 60s. And they never found his head or the murderer, by the way, which is always a nice thought to have in the back of your mind. I mean, these things are pretty standard if you grow up queer in any like conservative area, but recently also trigger warning, recently a trans man got murdered in the city where I go to university in, and during a pride parade also. This was a nice firm reminder to many queer people and myself that if you're queer in Germany, you're not safe from being murdered or assaulted in any way at all. Even in a more progressive area like that city, even doing freaking pride in public, you're not safe from being abused and killed. So you're not safe anywhere, basically. And I feel like us as queer people, in Germany specifically, are always aware of that fact, but if you surround yourself with other queer people in real life and on the internet, that reality can sometimes drift to the back of your head because you don't necessarily engage with cis people or heterosexual people or bigoted people in general if you do that kind of as a defense mechanism. But when then stuff like this happens, it kind of takes you right back to reality, and it starts to sink in that, oh, you're actually not safe here. You're actually very prosecuted here, and your rights are not guaranteed. It's not easy being queer in Germany, and I mean, I'm white, and it's very much easier for me than if you were, for example, a queer POC in Germany. And I'm also not as much visibly queer if you just saw me walking through the street and passing you by. At least I don't think so necessarily. I'm non-binary, and if I'm ever going to pursue my transition and be more outwardly queer, that would put me at even more danger. So it's always a pretty terrifying thought to know that this is the reality of the country that I'm living in. And I feel like on the international stage, Germany and North European countries, or even some Western European countries like the Netherlands or maybe even Belgium, always have this representation that people think that these places are like ideal for queer people and are basically safe. And I'm sorry to burst that bubble, I wish they were, but they're not. Yeah, so that's that. MBH_mushroom asks if you have ever integrated various folk practices like German and Irish. And yeah, rolling back to what I already said about 𝔖𝔭𝔬𝔢𝔨𝔢𝔫𝔨𝔶𝔨𝔢𝔫𝔨𝑚 I incorporate Northwestern German folk magic, 𝔖𝔭𝔬𝔢𝔨𝔢𝔫𝔨𝔶𝔨𝔢𝔫, and the specific Silesian folk magic from the area where my family is from, which would be 𝔑𝔫𝔨𝔢𝔫. And some people might just see these two and assume that they're both German, when I would beg to differ, because in my opinion, Silesia is its own cultural continuum, because, for example, they're not just Germanic languages spoken in there. It's a whole thing. I'm not going to go into all of that. So yeah, I would definitely say I incorporate both practices from different cultures, but not necessarily like something that's so drastically different like German folk magic and Irish folk magic, because I don't have any ties to Ireland or any other place than Germany and Silesia, at least to my knowledge. I probably have more like Central and Northern European ancestry, and so that's what I focus on mostly. And I also focus on these two things because these are the cultures I like semi-grew up with, more so Northwestern German culture than Silesian culture, because it was repressed a lot. But these are the things that I'm most familiar with, at least. And these are the questions that I'm going to be answering today. If you have any other questions, you can write them down in the comments, or DM me them on my other social media, or wait for my next kind of shout out of, hey, I'm doing a Q&A, and then ask the question there. And yeah, links to my social media will of course be in the description again. And I hope you kind of enjoyed this more shortened video, and I'll see you guys soon. 𝔖𝔬𝔢𝔨𝔬𝔢𝔨𝔢𝔫𝔨𝔫𝔨𝔫𝔨𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫